Hey, listeners, we will keep this quick. All we want for Hanukkah and Christmas this year is you.
That's right, you. A sponsor of the Foretop.
Yes, folks, sponsor the Four Top to get your brand's message into the ear cavities of our audience of wine insiders.
It's the gift that keeps on giving because our content is evergreen.
Just like Christmas. Email Zoe at theforetop.org or reach out to us on social media to learn more.
Okay, before we get into the real news,
This is real news.
fine, this is real news. But before we get into the really real news, we wanted to dive into a fresh oven baked press release from Pizza Hut.
Hey, no one out pizzas the hut.
And now, no one outwines the hut.
Unfortunately, that's too true. Allow me to read from a recent Pizza Hut press release. This holiday season, Pizza Hut is elevating the art of holiday hosting and gifting with a twist on an iconic pairing pizza and wine. For the first time ever, Pizza Hut is stepping into the wine business by launching a pizza wine, a unique limited edition tomato wine that captures the essence of your favorite slice in every sip.
Wow, wow, wow. I love this innovation. So, apparently, Pizza Hut paired up with Irvine's Just Beyond Paradise Winery, bit of a mouthful, which is in Kansas. And they make this beautiful tomato based wine that's apparently infused with fresh basil. So, my mouth is certainly watering.
Well, Nick, we know you are a fan of tomato wine. I think we talked
Hmm.
about this previously. I have not had the honor of tasting this particular cuvee, but apparently it has a quote, subtle hint of toasted oak, reminiscent of a perfectly baked pizza crust. Now, that is some bold copywriting right there. And I must say, I am inspired by those tasting notes.
Well, Catherine, we felt bad that you haven't had the chance to try this great stuff, so Nick and I emptied out our change jars and got you the limited edition gift set.
That's right. You'll be receiving a bottle of Pizza Hut's new wine, two Pizza Hut branded wine glasses, and a wine opener. An ideal present for foodies and wine enthusiasts alike, according to Pizza Hut.
Oh my God. I went to the winery's website, but they were sold out. How on earth did you get it?
Ruby knows a guy. That's all you need to know.
Would you believe me if I said I've never had Pizza Hut before?
Landowners weigh whether to plant crops or harvest clean energy. Prepare your maw for faux foie gras. Trump taps a new Secretary of Agriculture, and it is time to acknowledge Indigenous peoples' impact on wine. These are the wine news stories we're covering this week on your favorite wine news podcast, The Foretop. I'm Catherine Cole here with Ruby Welkovich and Nick Toole.
Well, folks, looks like we know who the next Secretary of Agriculture will be. Drumroll, please. It's gonna be Brooke Rollins.
She grew up in Texas, graduated from Texas A&M University with an undergraduate degree in agricultural development, and served as domestic policy chief during Trump's first term.
Rollins, who will replace Tom Vilsack, is currently president and CEO of the America First Policy Institute, a group helping to lay the groundwork for a second Trump administration. Now, everyone's been paying attention to the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, but all this time, the America First Policy Institute has been laying out its own plans.
So, wait, what are those plans?
Well, we checked out the organization's website at americafirstpolicy.com. And so, mostly as far as we can tell, the AFPI stance on agriculture is mostly just concerned with the possibility of the Chinese Communist Party, the old CCP, owning agricultural land in the United States.
What does this mean for wine growers? Well, as far as we know, not a lot of US vineyards are owned by Chinese nationals, not to mention the CCP.
I mean, the only one that comes to mind is that the NBA star Yao Ming owns a winery in Napa Valley, and he, I believe, is still a Chinese citizen. So clearly, Yao Ming is plotting to take over Napa. I don't know, dribble down the court, shoot, and score. Nick, can you help me out with this metaphor? I don't really remember anything about basketball.
No, I think you actually nailed it. That's pretty much the sport in a nutshell. Yeah. Anyway, I don't think Yao Ming, noted humanitarian and philanthropist, is a threat to American democracy. So if Rollins and the Trump administration try to take his winery away, I'm not sure Napa would really stand for that.
Okay, well, how else could Brooke Rollins potentially bring change to the US wine industry?
We don't know a lot at this point, but we do know that the Trump administration is pretty determined to roll back as many Department of Ag policies as possible that are focused on fighting climate change.
So I'm going to guess that those billions that the Biden administration invested in regenerative or so called climate smart farming practices and restoration projects are going away. Use up your federal money while you can, folks.
Yeah, I'm actually looking right now at the map of the Regional Conservation Partnership Program run by the USDA, and I am seeing projects right now that are protecting wine country. I'm actually seeing in my home, the Willamette Valley, there's a program restoring, protecting, and supporting tribal connection to native oak habitat. And I know oak savannas are a really important part of our wine country ecosystems. And there's another project I'm seeing conserving Columbia Basin aquifer water. So, yeah, some of these programs probably are going to be going away, and that's a shame.
Next, we have an interesting report courtesy of Capital Press in Salem, Oregon. Apparently, farmers in Washington state are finding that leasing their land to wind and solar farms is more profitable than actually farming.
This is so interesting. This report from the Department of Commerce finds that pasture land and low value cropland could be more valuable as homes for windmills and solar panels than for crops like dryland wheat or hay. For example, one solar project in Klickitat County could end up raising landowner income by up to $470,000 per year.
And in King and Snohomish counties, the Bureau of Land Management has leased land for between about $1,000 and $3,000 per acre. That's a lot. But while this could be a boon for farmers and landowners, not everyone is enthused. Some are worried about losing agricultural land, and some local governments are opposing wind and solar projects. It isn't totally clear yet how these projects are affecting rural communities.
It may just come down to the type of project. Solar projects take up more space, but they can allow for livestock grazing. Wind projects generally produce more energy and can allow for continued farming. But it's all about the amount of space, the intensity of the UV rays, and the speed and consistency of the wind.
You know, you actually sound like a viticulturalist right now, Nick.
Well, on that note, this is a wine podcast, so how should we look at this from a wine professional's point of view? This Capital Press piece notes that land planted with higher value crops, such as apples and cherries, is not as attractive for solar and wind developers because the lease price for the land would have to factor in the lost revenue from those high value crops.
That's true, true. But we are at an interesting point right now with wine grapes where we have kind of saturation in the United States. And I've been reading lately about prominent wineries actually backing out on big fruit contracts this past year. So it's a really precarious moment for the wine industry. And I'm just wondering, we may get to the point where Europe is right now, where growers are forced to tear out vines. If we get to that point, some of these large vineyard owners, those who own, substantial acreage, which is less common in areas like the Willamette Valley here in Oregon, but in Washington and California for sure, these folks may want to look at devoting some of their less lucrative pieces of land to solar panels and wind farms as alternative sources of income. Hey, I'm maybe a pessimist, but climate change seems to be a thing. So I almost am wondering about a future where the shade thrown by pole mounted solar panels could actually cool off some sites that are getting hotter and hotter. So something for
That's
the wine
interesting.
industry to kind of keep an eye on.
That's
Yeah.
a cool idea.
Yeah.
For our next story, we venture a little beyond the world of wine to the general world of fine foods. We're talking foie gras. You guys had foie gras?
I remember being at a restaurant in Switzerland and it was so rich. I mean, the animal cruelty part aside, it was so rich I could only have a couple of bites, and I remember the wait staff, like, stopped me on the way out of the restaurant and wanted to know what was wrong with the foie gras and what was wrong with me and, like, why I hadn't eaten all my foie gras, and I was like it was delicious with the wine, just a bite, but I couldn't have more than a bite. I was just, like, overwhelmed by flavor.
I have never had foie gras. I think that was it was like I'm aware of the animal cruelty part, and I think it's just too much for me.
Yeah.
And it was the one thing when I was in Paris over the summer that I told my friends, like, I'm willing to try literally everything else in terms of like experimental French food, but I'm not willing to try that.
All right. But how would you feel if the foie gras paired with your sauterne was lab grown? For our next story, we turn to the Washington Post and journalist Tim Carman, who wrote a recent story about Vow, an Australian based foie gras producer. Vow doesn't use a single duck or goose in their products.
Ooh, I love this. Yes, their lab grown foie gras, which they call forged gras, love that, uses, well, they still use animals. They use cells from Japanese quail, which they grow in bioreactors. They then boil fats like coconut oil with corn and spices and mix that with the quail cells and a gelling gum. And that's that. You've got forged gras.
I have spent many years making vegan chopped liver because chopped liver is like a very popular Jewish food.
Mm.
So that sounds really interesting. And from what I know about foie gras, it has a really particular flavor. So I'm really curious what this stuff tastes like. According to the author of the article, forged gras doesn't really taste like foie gras. Apparently, the texture and melt in your mouthiness of foie gras is there, but forged gras is more earthy and mushroomy than it is offally.
Yeah, offal refers to the edible internal organs and associated stuff of animals, and the flavor is certainly strong. Apparently, the founder of Vow was actually intentional about dialing back that flavor in favor of that earthiness.
Boy, that sounds good to me because I am a huge fan of mushrooms. And as I recall, like I said, not a huge fan of foie gras. So I would definitely be interested in trying this forged gras, but I'm also interested in who the market is for it. Like, who is the demographic? According to Vow, only 10% of Americans have ever even tried foie gras. So who's going to buy this fake foie gras?
Vow's founder claims that this is an opportunity. If so few Americans have had foie gras, then they don't have years of experience to compare it against a lab grown version.
But price is an issue. Right now, Vow estimates that the retail price of their forged gras could be more than $45 a pound. So that is not cheap.
And on top of that, it doesn't have full regulatory approval in the US, and some state governments are explicitly against lab grown meat. It will likely be a while until we see it widely distributed at an affordable price.
Yeah, on an interesting side note, according to the article, quote, given recent personnel changes at the FDA and the unknown regulatory landscape under the forthcoming Trump administration, tariffs, the company is focused on other markets at the moment. So, yes, it will be a little while until we see forged gras alongside our Sauterne here in the United States.
Sounds like I'll need to get my own Japanese quail cells in a bioreactor then.
Easy peasy.
To wrap up our news this Thanksgiving week, we wanted to recognize the contributions of Indigenous winemakers in the United States.
Yeah, there's a piece this week in Sever by Sofia Perez that introduces wineries owned and run by Indigenous Americans. For starters, shout out to former Four Top guest Tara Gomez, who, along with her wife Mireya Taribo, operates the cult label Camins to Dreams in Lompoc on California's Central Coast. Cheers, Tara.
And in the Sierra Nevada foothills, cheers to winemaker Bob Campbell, whose label Maye is in the Coast Miwok language that his mother worked really hard to revive.
Cherokee Shawnee winemaker Brandy Gray makes Pinot Noir and sparkling rosé at Grey Wing Cellars in the Willamette Valley's Yamhill Carlton appellation. Cheers, Brandy.
And this was not mentioned in the article, but I wrote about this project many years ago for 750 Daily, and I just wanted to shout out to New Mexico's Tamaya Vineyard. It's in the Santa Ana Pueblo, which is actually a mile high in elevation. It's a beautiful spot, and the Tamayame tribe has a really diverse agricultural operation there. And that includes wine grapes. They're growing Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier for the Gruit Traditional Method Sparkling Winery in Albuquerque. So cheers to the Tamayame tribe.
Instead of a question of the week, we wanted to highlight our reel of the week instead. We were lucky enough to chat with Harmon Skurnick of Skurnick Wines and Spirits a couple of weeks ago, and he gave us an excellent breakdown of how Trump's tariffs could impact wine. Most notably, he reminded us that those tariffs aren't paid by the targeted countries such as France or China, they're actually paid by American companies. It looks like this distinction resonated with our listeners.
Yes, Skurnick is also the treasurer of the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance. So he does know what he's talking about. And our listeners and social media followers had some wonderful comments. Matzinger Davies wrote, "Thank you for digging deeper into tariffs and how our industry could, might, and will be impacted. This is important information. Appreciate your sharing."
Turning Tide Wine simply commented with the raised hands emoji, which I've always known to mean preach.
Hmm.
And on TikTok, one user noted that the Trump team's assertion that other countries will pay the tariffs is akin to the idea that Mexico will pay for the border wall. I'd say it's an apt comparison.
TikTok user Melody left us 4 comments. Thank you, Melody. Melody notes that we will be looking at higher prices if Trump pulls through on these tariffs.
Thank you for all your input and look for more engaging videos and questions of the week on our social channels.
So it's time for dessert, guys. Little Thanksgiving week dessert. But Ruby, you were telling us you had a pretty exciting weekend. Maybe that could be our dessert course.
Well, yes, I spent the entire weekend holding space for the lyrics of Defying Gravity. If you know, you know. No, but in all seriousness, one of the selling points of my apartment is that I live a block away from the Nighthawk Cinema, which is an independent movie theater in Brooklyn that serves food and drinks during the film. For movie releases, they also add in special menu items. So, for example, one that was celebrating Gladiator is called Rage is Your Gift, which is a spiced house red wine. But I was really excited about the specialty cocktails for Wicked, which was Elphaba's Elixir. It's like a green drink, which is gin, elderflower, aloe, tarragon, and lime. And then Glendade, which was a strawberry lemonade, rose water, edible sparkles, and if you wanted, you could add a grapefruit and rose botanical vodka.
Yum.
Wow.
It was pretty sick. This got me thinking because last year we did some fun wine pairings for different things. So I wanted to ask Catherine if you had wine pairings for the two witches, Elphaba and Glinda.
For those of us who are not up to date on Wicked, Ruby, remind me or let me know. I know Glinda from The Wizard of Oz, but
Glinda is, yes, the pink, bubbly good witch, and Elphaba is the Wicked Witch of the West. She's the green one.
Okay, so the Glinda, the lovely, pink, fluffy, pretty witch, for her, I'm thinking like a Bougie Cerdon. Okay, I'm just reading from the Kermit Lynch website here. Bougie Cerdon is anything but a serious wine. Its seductive, deep pink glimmers in the glass, emanating ambrosial fragrances of alpine strawberries and roses. It dances over the palate, just sweet enough, perked up by a fine bead and a crystalline finish, crisp as a mineral spring. Does that sound right for Glinda?
Absolutely, because the next line is, great wine does not need to be thought-provoking or meditative. And
Yes.
also that this terroir can manifest itself in the most festive and carefree ways, which definitely describes Glinda. Okay, and then something for Elphaba, I would say something like maybe a little earthy, funky, maybe something green or like with a green label.
Okay, so Ruby, I gotta say chartreuse for this, which is not a wine, but it's a liqueur, and I'm sure you all have had cocktails made with it, but it is the original green cocktail. And I think it originated around like the year 1000. It's from the Carthusian monks. But it is green. It is very green.
I love that. All right, well, thank
Easy
you.
decision.
Very aromatic too. This has been the Four Top Podcast. I am our executive producer, Catherine Cole.
I'm our producer, Nick Toole.
I'm media and design manager Ruby Welkovich.
Keelan King is the composer and performer of our theme music.
And folks, this week we are asking you to do something different. If you could please share your favorite Four Top episode with a friend, we would greatly appreciate it.
You can grab the episode link from your favorite podcast platform or our website at thefourtop.org or from the link in our social bios.
Well, I am dreaming of being on a mile-high vineyard in New Mexico because I just think it looks beautiful up there. This is Catherine signing out.
Coming off of a weekend spent jamming out to James Murphy's musical genius, this is Nick Toole signing out.
And Defying Gravity from the Emerald City, this is Ruby signing out. Stay safe out there, and thanks for listening.